Be of good cheer to God, who is creator of the oceans of life, the pilot of our boats, and the wind in our sails. Amen. Be of good cheer. I love that really long story of the shipwreck of St. Paul in Acts chapter 27. It is for me a very relatable story, at least metaphorically. I've never been in an actual shipwreck, thank goodness. It's also a very comforting story. Now, there's something lovely for me generally about the book of the Acts of the Apostles. Did you know that it's the sister book to the Gospel according to Luke? Did you know that? The same author who wrote the stories of Jesus in Luke also writes the stories of the early church in Acts. They go hand in hand. Not only that, but did you know that they mirror each other in fascinating ways? Almost everything that happens in the Gospel of Luke happens in some way or another in the Acts of the Apostles. The only difference is that it's not Jesus who's the main character in Acts, but his followers. And this is important. Everything Jesus did and experienced in the Gospel according to Luke is done and experienced by Jesus' followers, the church, in Acts. Jesus healed people in need, so too do Peter and James and John. Jesus raised people from the dead, so too does Paul after he preaches a really long sermon at night. Jesus adds new followers to his group, and so too are new followers added daily in the church. And this is the most important similarity between the two books, Jesus experienced the hostilities of those in power, and so too do Jesus' followers. In the Acts of the Apostles, we read about how much Jesus' followers are just like Jesus Christ. So much that it is in the Acts of the Apostles that followers of Jesus are called Christians, right? They are just like Jesus in that they experience the great heights of his ministry as well as the great lows of his ministry. While there are many stories of glory in the Acts of the Apostles, there are far more stories of suffering and pain. The cross of Jesus in Luke's gospel casts a long shadow in the book of Acts. You'll remember that Deacon Stephen is stoned to death right at the beginning, right? The apostles are beaten and imprisoned again and again, and Paul, in chapter 27, experiences his shipwreck. This isn't a literary accident that both the crucifixion and the shipwreck occur at the end of Luke and at the end of Acts. The shipwreck of Paul is Acts' version of the crucifixion. Both stories, Jesus' crucifixion and Paul's shipwreck, tell of what happens when the forces of this world threaten to destroy God's mission and ministry in this world and all who participate in it. Acts is a user beware story. If you want to follow Jesus, make sure you understand that following Jesus leads you to a cross. It leads you to a shipwreck. There's no other glory in following Jesus other than the glory of the cross. There's no other glory in the church other than the glory of the shipwreck. Just by the by, did you know that most churches worship in a shipwreck? Did you know that? If you were to go into a more traditional church like Christ Church Cathedral in downtown Vancouver, or one of the great Christian monuments or cathedrals in Europe, you would enter through the front doors into what is called a nave. That's right, it's a nave. You knew this, right? The nave is the main part of the church building where most of the people who come to church sit and pray. Right now you are in the nave. Nave, of course, is from the Latin word navus. Can you say Latin navus? Navus. Good. Now you can feel like you learned something. From which we get the English word navy. Nave, navy, navus. Navus means boat. Christians worship in a boat. I encourage you sometime when you go to Christ Church Cathedral next, maybe to celebrate the confirmation of a member of our youth in April. When you go, I encourage you to take a picture of the ceiling of the nave at Christ Church Cathedral. And then what you need to do is turn that picture upside down and notice how similar the ceiling architecture is with the design of a wooden boat. Because the ceiling is actually an upside-down boat. Christians worship in a shipwreck. I find this fascinating, and I find it very encouraging. God is building a church. This is his great experiment in the healing of the world, and part of this experiment is forming us into a people of courage. Can you say courage? Courage. In our reading from Acts this morning, Paul twice calls those on the doomed ship to have courage. Have courage. Courage. This is a unique word, used only 3 times in the entire New Testament, this word for courage. Twice in the story of the shipwreck, have courage, and once more later on in the letter of James. The word is not meant to convey a sense of strength or gritting one's teeth and bearing it like, have courage, men, as they're off to war. No, it rather means something like this. Have courage, be of good cheer, be happy. That's what this word means. When James uses this word in his letter, he writes that if anyone has courage or is of good cheer, let them sing a song. Let's keep that in mind when we wonder why it's important to commemorate the shipwreck of Paul. We don't commemorate it with gritted teeth or lamentation, but with a joyful song of joy. I thank God we worship in a shipwreck. Let me share with you the main reason why we should commemorate the feast of the shipwreck of Paul. A feast day that is a national holiday on the small Mediterranean island of Malta, which is traditionally the place where Paul wrecked his ship. We commemorate it because life, doesn't it, seems to be one shipwreck after another. Have you ever felt this? That your life is like an unstable boat headed toward ruin? That there are winds and forces that seem to move you into places you don't want to go? Have you experienced that? Maybe it's in a relationship, a marriage. Maybe it's a business venture. Maybe it's your health. We are all of us being driven in life by things bigger than us, by forces we can't control, by northeasters driving down from Crete. Did you know this? Did you know that you are not in control? How does that make you feel? Not in control of the weather. We're not in control of the tides. We're not in control of which red team is going to win this afternoon. Wouldn't you prefer to be in control? It's one of the most terrifying realizations of being human. We're not in control of much of our life. And those places where we feel like we have just a small sense of control, well, we grasp onto that control, don't we? And we don't let go. We hold that control over our children, over our parents, because it's our turn, over our employees, our committee members. We grasp the little control we have, often in damaging ways. We take our fear of not being in ultimate control and put it on those things in which we have some degree of control, thinking that by having some degree of control over the little things in life, it will give us more control over the bigger things in life. But that ain't the case. To commemorate the shipwreck of Paul is to be humbly aware of our limits, and to put our trust on the one who holds everything in the palm of his hands. To commemorate the shipwreck of Paul is to remember that we don't even know how many hairs are on our heads. and to place our lives into the hands of the one who does. Put our relationships into God's hands, our business ventures, our health, everything that is out of our control, we put into God's hands because, and this is one of the greatest gifts of the cross, because God's hands are not the pristine hands of marbled statues, are they? God's hands aren't the indifferent hands of a distant deity, are they? No. God's hands are the nail-marked hands of love. God has gone to the depths of human experience so that we know we are not alone in the most turbulent times of our lives, but have a friend, have a helper right next to us who knows our every weakness, who knows our frailty, who knows our fear, and so who can walk with us to the crosses that we approach. We have a friend who sails with us on the storm to the reefs that threaten to break up our boats and give us hope that we will not be abandoned in the darkest parts of our lives, but be raised up and given new life, even when it doesn't seem like it's possible. This is why we commemorate the cross of Jesus Christ, and this is why we commemorate the shipwreck of Paul. Shipwrecks and crosses are signs that God is with us in the most vulnerable places of our lives, promising not to keep us from the storms of life, but that while the storms come and go and the boats we travel on are threatened, not a hair on our heads will be lost, and God will give us what we need to have courage to sing songs of joy in the midst of it. For God is building a church that will have courage, that will sing in the face of the storms of this world. God is building a community of faith and hope and love who will not be threatened by the difficulties that come our way, be it racism, violent political rhetoric, war, poverty, the hoarding of wealth, and all of the other things that we must face in this good world that has been tainted by sin. We are not threatened by the storm, but stand with courage, singing to face all those things, trusting that the God who has made us will be with us through the storm, through the shipwreck, to the life that exists beyond them. Just two things to help you if you are ever overwhelmed in the storm of your life. First, take communion, eat. Did you catch that in the story? That's what Paul offered in the midst of the storm. Did you hear that? What does taking communion mean but to align our lives with the life of Christ, who faced his own cruciform shipwreck? It means to take communion means to give thanks to God who sails with us toward our own shipwrecks. Whenever you are overwhelmed and think that you have no more courage to face any more storms in your life, come here and take communion. Come to this place and eat the food of Jesus and give thanks to God that you have made it this far. And I promise you, you'll find the courage to sing songs of joy again. The second thing to do, if you are overwhelmed by the storms in life, is to hold on to what is near to you and kick your way to shore. This is my favorite part of the story. Once the ship has been wrecked, there's no going back, right? There's only going down with the ship or going forward, grabbing the planks that are floating around you and kicking your way to shore. Do you know what you have around you to help you in the lowest of places? Do you know what it is? Do you know what friends are there with you to support you? Do you know what spiritual practices you have to help you? Do you know contemplative prayer? Do you know spiritual direction? Do you know about reading scripture? Do you have at your command a song of courage to sing? And if not, find those planks to help you float to shore. Do you have that song of courage to sing, just like those who walked for civil rights and were floating on planks of a shipwreck in the midst of the American shipwreck of the 60s, who sang, what did they sing? They sang, "We shall overcome." That's what they sang, isn't it? In the midst of a shipwreck. Do you have a song of courage ready to sing in your heart? Just like those in South Africa who marched against apartheid toward a potential shipwreck of violence, who sang, "Freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, it's coming." Oh yes, I know. Do you know that song? Oh, you got to know that song. Do you have a song of courage to sing in your heart? If not, here's one. It's a good one to sing in the midst of the storms that come your way. It goes like this. You can sing it with me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wreck like me, that saved a wreck like me. How does it go? I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. God is building a church who will sing with courage in the face of the storms of life. Sing on, sing on, sing on. Happy feast day of the shipwreck of St. Paul.